What my uh, task is in this role of host is to just to tell the story of yesterday, to frame my experience as in that host role, and then to sort of situate what's going to come next for the next half hour or so, in terms of both content, like actual like learning about insight and about some of the skills. And so as we started the day, there's even as the organizing committee, it's been really our intention and our aspiration that that EC, this Insight Collaborations International, will be is an organization that uses insight as its DNA, that we really aspire to practice it. So we have our roles that are loosely structured. And as we got into the roles of organizer and then particularly summit organizer, we had to give roles to you as participants and a pattern of interaction where you would have things to do, and with that aspiration, that good that we wanted of people being able to connect and learn more about insight and benefit others as you go off to do your particular roles, personal, professional. And we started then the day, so in your role then as like your police officer or parent or um, yoga instructor, you also then chose to take on the role of Insight Summit participant. So then we sent you the link of how to join, and just today there was okay, so that particular link, which is a structure, it's a means of it's a in the technical term, it's a good of order that allows you to be able to participate in this. So we've sent that to you, you've come in, and then we started the day, and there's a carrier. And so what a carrier is how it shapes what we know and value and decide. And so Jackie provided that for us with recognizing that we have bodies and connecting that with our mental and our emotional and our spiritual selves, and provided that kind of carrier for us to be able to take on that role of participant. And I, as in the role of host, welcomed you. And so there's a way in which that situated you in your role. And then Megan did this brilliant job of talking about method. And so she invited us to pay attention to the insight, recognizes that there's in both conflict and change or any kind of decision that we make, is that there's a cognitive dimension and there's a social dimension. So the cognitive dimension in the insight approach has a model of knowing and valuing and deciding. So, and there's a loop, which we talk about as the model, which we can't get into here, but it's knowing and valuing and deciding. And there's a social dimension that is through our role. And so she invited us to pay attention to that whisper, as she talked about it, which is specifically the knowing and valuing and deciding, and use our curiosity. And then through our role, be able to act in those patterns of interaction to make changes in the structures and systems in which we're operating. And so that got taken up. Then we shifted the pattern of interaction, so putting you into groups to think about that, as well as then into the workshops. And in the workshops, people had the opportunity to really reflect. And so many of you had a chance to work with Cheryl Picard, who is a master practitioner and one of the founders of the Insight approach, who's certainly taught me a lot about it. Really matters what you pay attention to, because as Megan does extensive amounts of training with police officers and has brilliantly identified the three skills being to notice, to verify, and to ask. And what we're doing is we're noticing cognition and action and role. So it's like, I was thinking about this on my swim this morning, like notice and verify and ask is like ENVA, and that we're asking about cognition, action, and role like car. So ENVA, car. And so you can ask about any of those things. About, you notice the action, so you verify and notice that you're a little bit distant today, and so verify that and then ask about it. And so these principles are used, and these strategies are the method of being able to make decisions that are based on knowing and valuing and deciding. And so Cheryl did some work on delinking with many of you. Jackie led a circle where she really asked us to share about how we respond with to threat, because one of the key elements of the insight approach, as John really spoke about, was the recognition that threat truncates our cognition. And so we're not able to be as expansive. We're not able to be curious or as discerning or as conscientious when we're experiencing threat. And neuroscience is now recognizing that as well with how our minds are activated in that experience of stress. And that on the contrary, when we do have a sense of connection, as we're really building here, there's more of a sense of security or satisfaction or contentment, and that it allows us to be able to be expansive and more curious. And so that in that experience then of what we're paying attention to, we're recognizing what extent is someone experiencing threat and is more truncated and less curious and more certain, and how open are they to being able to engage more mindfully or more expansively with others. And some of you also had the opportunity to work with Chook, who's done this very in-depth exploration of the body and the aesthetic aspect of how we're carried in our knowing and valuing and deciding, and how connected we are with our bodies and our spirits in being able to create art, which also carries others in this way of being able to connect to our valuing in a very elemental way. We may not really understand it, but as we reflect on this artistic experience, we become more discerning in our valuing of what was significant, what was the impact, how did it move me. And this is the journey of insight artistry, about being able to become more precise about that, to be able to create art that can move people to a more expansive cognitive operations, to be able to again sort of do the more conscientious thing. So we came back in a group, and then we had an opportunity to listen to John and Andrea in their roles as master peacemakers. So we gave them that role. They don't take that on themselves, but we heard about their work and some of the things that carry them. John used the metaphor that is an image that could carry me around whitewater and the importance of going into that reflection of where is threat and how to become more expansive by being moved out of the whitewater. We're from that very truncated state, when we're paying attention with what Megan identified as kind of a reflexivity, that paying attention to what's going on for us, that we can be moved to a more expansive state. Andrea also talked about that picture that he took and that relationship between himself and the driver. And as he and I talked back and forth about it, what was going on, we wondered, in that the role of driver, and who became a kind of protector. And so what was going on for him? What was his cognitive process? Clearly he discerned some kind of threat. And Andrea was wondering, well, is it so? Is it so that it was dangerous for Andrea to take a picture? Maybe, maybe not. But that wondering, holding that certainty quite lightly. And there's also opportunities, as John and Andrea both really notice, is there's threat. There's real threat where people can be hurt, damaged, killed. And the insight approach then offers us the opportunity to, how do we be more conscientious even in the face of threat, which is what we talked about with Jackie. How do we recognize that even when there is a real threat, how do we be less reactive and more conscientious, more wise in the way that we respond to that very real threat, which is certainly the work that John, Andrea, Awel, Jordan, many of you, us who are involved in ongoing threat situations, how to respond more conscientiously, which is what so much police training has done. And Megan's work as well, to expand that repertoire, to be able to use targeted curiosity as a tactic in policing and community policing. And so teaching police officers how to be curious about what others know and value and decide, to be able to do more compliance-based work, just as the artists at Insight Artistry are curious about what others know and value and decide in their efforts to work on anti-racism. So this is the way that method is working in all the various roles that we have to act more conscientiously in the ways that we move, where the mediators have an opportunity to inquire about what is catching people in that white water, and being able to support that movement through an articulation of what matters to a less turbulent place. And we had the chance to hear from Awel and David, who are living their experiences of South Sudanese conflict, and then the opportunity for us to think about the transferable skills about being able to activate our awareness, as Awel put, or to be able to wonder about the system, as David did. So then we moved into some more reflection, and after that, what happened after that? What happened after Andrea and John? Did we do some more breakout room? Yep, we did another breakout room. So we reflected on that together.
And we wondered about vulnerability.
That's right. And then we went, so John and I came up with that question. And so that was a carrier. And so back and forth, John and I activating a different kind of pattern in interaction that we've developed over some years of working together as facilitators. So you watched us do that in a non-conflictual way, where we were disagreeing without conflict. We weren't generating threat. It was a very creative kind of disagreement. What do you think? No, don't like it. Think about this. Okay, better. Yep, let's do that. So there can be disagreement in a way without generating conflict. No threat, no conflict. So that's then we had people in small groups being able to go into those roles of insight thinker and thinking about their roles and how useful it was, and talking about vulnerability, where we can discern threat without a decision to defend, where we can be more conscientious when we experience threat, or even as Cheryl says, like, is it so that there's a threat? Being able to wonder. And of course, this happens in a split second. And so this practice that we have of reflecting on those ideas helps us become more able and more precise, and so that we can do that better. That's the practice of developing insight skills. And then what happened after that? We moved into kind of a closing, right?
Yep.
We did the closing. So we had a plenary, and then we moved into closing. And that was the opportunity where Viev and John and Jamie, that guy Jamie, who wondered about what was significant. And so that is a key question in the insight method, about asking about valuing. And when Jamie was talking about the 4 categories of valuing: personal and practical, relational, and systemic, we imagined that there's several people wondering, what's that? And so when we did our debrief afterwards, the 4 or 5 of us, we started to think about, how could we support more learning around that specific thing, have more content around insight? And so we thought it would be helpful for Megan to do that. So she's going to talk about those 4 categories of valuing and talk more specifically about valuing. And then we'll do some modeling of some insight skills, sort of specifically targeted, so that they'll link to what we've been talking about. And then it'll give you a chance to just talk about, then you'll do some small group work, and Viev's going to lead us through that. So that's the story of the day, from an insight analysis of like how this actually works, that you're a part of this system. And if anyone else wants to say anything along that line, there's just ways of, just before we move into to Megan, anything else that others could add, feel free to do that in the chat. But I'd welcome any other kind of, that was like from my role, and you've all had your roles and your, the things that you knew and valued and decided as well. So put that in the chat, and then over to you, Megan, for a little bit more about the categories of valuing.
Right. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you so much for that analysis, Marnie. I really think that it helped to wrap up where we started and where we ended up yesterday, and really did illuminate the ways in which we like to look at things from an insight perspective, where you can piece it apart and recognize, as you were saying, the cognition, the roles, the systems at play, to understand it more deeply. We are so very captured by what's in front of us, right? That we don't take the time to pay attention to what's going on behind that. And that's really what you made clear just now. So I appreciate that a lot. To move to valuing, right? Jamie he mentioned 4 categories of valuing, and I want to talk about valuing because it's so very important in the insight approach. Here is a slide that describes it, but so what is valuing, right? So valuing is an operation of consciousness. It's part of, it's a something that we do with our minds. It's a performance, a cognitive performance that moves us from knowing to doing, right? So we experience the world around us. We generate an understanding of it. We become relatively certain that we know it. And automatically it generates a feeling in us. And that's a spontaneous human reaction. We might feel joy, we might feel sadness, we might feel indifference, we might feel threat, right? And that is us valuing, it's discerning significance in what we have come to know. And discerning significance is moved by a question, right? And that's put up here. So valuing is discerning significance in what we have come to know by asking and answering the question, what is the significance of this to me? Or how does this matter to me? What is the impact of this? How does this fit into my context, my role, my moment in time, right? And typically that significance is communicated to us through feeling. So even before we have words for anything, we feel there's an affect. Like I said before, it might be joy, or it might be threat, or it might be fear, or it might be any of those, excitement, surprise, any of those various emotions that we experience as human beings. Those feelings are telling us how something matters. Now, we can begin to categorize those significances. And Jamie brought up 4 categories, and there may be more. And I think that there's some working out of another category of spiritual significance, spiritual valuing, right? But here we have 4 that we've been using for the last while. Personal value, category of valuing, practical category of valuing, the relational valuing, and structural valuing. And so here I'm presenting them as valuing, right? In conflict, we're valuing threat. So there could be a personal threat, a practical threat, relational threat, structural threat. We talk about gaps and fits. So we talk about these categories in a number of ways, but ultimately, personal valuing is around what's the significance to my sense of self, right? To who I am as a person, to how people view me, to how I'm understood, to how I present myself. So I might feel really good today about myself because I was able to check everything off my list. And so there's a personal valuing where I fulfilled an aspiration for myself and who I want to be, right? And how I want to be. I feel good about that. There might be some sort of personal threat if I feel like, wow, I didn't get anything done. I'm terrible. I'm horrible. I don't prioritize well. And, just feeling bad about myself. There could be something that could be, self-induced, or it could be somebody else making me feel badly about myself. But personal is about the significance around my sense of self. Practical valuing is significance around things related to the functioning of my life. So that could be, getting my job, making sure that my pipes aren't frozen when it's turning winter, having to pay that speeding ticket, getting good grades so that I can get into college, those kinds of things, practical things that relate to the functioning of my life. So yes, I got into college, or damn, I don't have the loan to pay for it, right? So personal, practical. Relational, this category relational is significance in relation to others, in my own relation to others and my expectations around their roles, right? My sister called me on my birthday, right? So that satisfies the significance around what I expect of her as a sister, right? And so if she doesn't, that might, elicit a relational threat in me, like, wow, my very own sister didn't even call me, so personal, practical, relational. And then we have this structural category, and that's around significance in terms of systems and how they're set up to produce certain objectives. So this would relate to institutions, setups, systems, goods of order as a let me just admit Susan Hartley here. And so there are these 4 categories that we've begun to pull out that help us understand in greater depth our own valuing. So when we have these categories, we can say, okay, so that feeling of joy was a personal valuing, or there was some personal and practical valuing in there. It helps us to generate that sense of self-awareness and the precision in our self-awareness. That is that whisper, right? That is often so easy to miss. And it also helps us to, in our curiosity around others, wow, is that scary because of what it tells you about your relationship, or what you need to function in your life, or about your sense of self, or about the system as a whole. So I just wanted to share those categories to give you some purchase on what we're talking about when we're talking about valuing and that discerning of significance in what we've come to know. So I welcome questions or thoughts or anything there.
I could just also tell a story of Megan and I sort of in a mini conflict a few days ago, just to sort of illustrate a little bit how they can all work and how we shifted. Would that be helpful?
Yeah.
Tell the story? Okay. So, so Megan, Viev, Marika, and I were meeting, and it was right before, like a day before the summit. And so we had some practical threats. I had some practical threats about, okay, we don't have a lot of time left. And we are just deciding kind of who's doing what and how is it going to be done. And Megan suggested that we do this particular activity. And I thought, oh, wait, I think that this needs to go in advance. And so I said to Megan, well, why don't you do this, Megan? And she said, whoa, like I've just done all of this planning about something else. I'm going to be giving kind of this talk about framing the insight approach. And so I could feel that she was like, whoa, like back off. And so she was actually able to articulate. She says, I am feeling some threat here because I'm feeling a little micromanaged. And so I was able to sort of, I recognized some threat for me about like personal, ooh, I don't want to be seen as a micromanager. Ooh. I also felt like practical, okay, we got to get this worked out. Some relational thing about, oh, like is Megan being a good collaborator by being, by taking that sort of taking the worst interpretation of me, let's say, as like rather than a helpful suggestion as a micromanager. And then systemic of, given the structure that we've already created, how do we kind of meet this learning that we're committed to doing? What was so amazing about being able to do this in the insight approach is for me to be able to say, right, got it. That would certainly make sense. So 1, notice she was upset. 2, verified, yep. And she then was able to articulate. I was like, okay, so what is that? She said, so she was able to do that self-check. Feeling threatened about micromanaging. I've already done all this work and that didn't feel respectful. For me to say, got it. That's your role. You go with it. Trust that. So that was really an example of like a conflict that we worked through to be able to sort of, for me to also then take care of my sense of like, oh, that personal gap that opened up. I don't want to be seen as a micromanager. So needed to kind of process that as well, so that we can have this like basis of going forward to create this event. And so that's sort of an example of where all of those things happened at the same time. And for me, the personal one was the most significant. So I needed to sort of take care of that. So then that is just an example of they all happen at the same time and that we can kind of engage to be able to move forward.
I think that's really helpful to move forward. Absolutely. To move forward and to really be self-aware in the moment. Okay, this is what this is for me, and it keeps us from that blaming, projecting, kind of demonizing reflex, I think, that we have as human beings, because we can recognize, okay, this is what it is for me. It's about, wow, I've devoted this time and now we want to do a change, or, so being able to, in that, very small amount of time, to generate that reflexivity and then, and to catch ourselves, to stop it from growing into any kind of conflict, right? To continue to move forward and not to personalize or blame our own valuing on a target who we care about. Kim asked a little bit about, a little more on the structural valuing. So I don't mind just talking more about that. So the structural valuing, and I can share the screen again here. That's really around systems and how they function, because as we've been talking about, we operate all the time within we have roles. We know, value, and decide within roles, depending on our context, within systems, right? And often we are working within a system that we want to function. We might be working in a system that's not functioning, but when Zoom is rolling smoothly, then there's wow, this is really working. Our platform, this structure is really working. That feels good. It's smooth. So there's a valuing of that the system or structure that we're working within is working well. When it breaks down, when people can't get into the Zoom, there's maybe threat around, wow, this platform, this structure, this system is there are glitches in it. There are pieces that are preventing the system from functioning, from producing those certain objectives that we want people to be able to easily sign on or get into their workshops, right? So that might be more a structural gap or a structural threat. So it's around those systems that we're operating in within our roles as we are coming to know, value, and decide. Is that a little clearer, I wonder? Yeah.
I just have a kind of a good, a couple of people have probably heard this, but in terms of the structural category, I went to the Shed Museum in Chicago, and in my role, I was a aquarium goer. So I get there and I'm very excited to be in this role of seeing the sea creatures that the shed had to offer. And I'm standing in line, and we get there and the line is a mile long. And it's a Tuesday at 11 o'clock and it's 11 a.m. and it's a mile long. And I'm thinking, okay. So I get in line and it takes whatever it takes. Maybe it takes an hour to get up there. And when we get to the front, there was one person who was checking tickets, and also one person who was selling tickets. So there wasn't even you can go here if you have a ticket, and you can go here if you need to buy a ticket. And I just thought, what? This is, oh my goodness, this is just wrong. Why is this why is this set up so badly? And now we're kind of agitated. We're all kind of agitated as aquarium goers. And then we get into the shed, and it almost just perpetuated there. The tanks were tiny. They were tiny. And these little sea creatures were stuck in these little tiny cages, it felt like. And I just had a gap this wide around, my goodness, I'm not enjoying my role as aquarium goer. And the system itself just felt like it was not fulfilling the objective. And I had so much valuing about it. And I kind of ranted and raved and oh my goodness. So I just remember thinking and Jamie was asking me about it. And I said, no, not personal, definitely structural. Nope, I'm not, there's nothing personal. I am not having a gap personally, exactly, except for my experience with the aquarium, but certainly I'm having a gap around the structural and the way that they should be set up and the way that they're not.
Great. I think that's really helpful. So I wonder if we pass it back to Marnie.
Yeah. That's exactly where I was going as well. And so what we thought would be helpful now is, as we've just talked about, so we've got sort of these ideas about method, and the point is not to just talk about them. The point is to use them, because as John says, there's nothing as practical as good theory, which he got from Lewin. So we're going to practice it. So what we're going to do is, and Bev will direct you more, but I'm going to model the kind of skill about asking about significance to Megan, and then being able to use that in a way that can just illuminate it more. So this is what you're going to get to do, and I'm going to do it with Megan. Megan, so what stood out for you as like particularly significant about yesterday?
Hmm. Well, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that question, Marnie. The day was so rich, and there were lots of significant moments. But there was definitely something that Andrea said in his session with John, where he was talking about, I think he began with his friend who's in the nursing home, right, who got a heart transplant, and he was marveling at how advanced the science has become so that we can actually take the organs of somebody who has passed away and put them in the bodies of living people who are ill and extend their lives for indefinite periods of time. I mean, it's an absolute marvel at the advancement that human beings are possible when it comes to medical science. And it's absolutely amazing. And he also said, and look at this technology that we're using now, which I just mentioned, Zoom, right? Human beings have been able to create these technologies that are connecting us all around the world in all these different time zones, right? That we can actually see each other and be present to each other in our offices, in our homes, with our own cups of tea, just through our computers. And the aspiration, right, is that we can do the same with peacemaking and change making, and in the field of human relationships, right? Which is what we are doing here in conflict resolution and leadership, in mediation, in change making, and all the pieces. And that is really the project of the Insight approach. It's to advance the precision of the science, really, that's required, the method that's required to, and he said it in such a beautiful way, but to connect us in our shared humanity while not disrupting the uniqueness of individuals. So it's this very fine balance that would just be such an amazing feat, a marvelous accomplishment of human minds, right? To be able to years down the road, be able to effectively move forward together in ways that didn't require violence, that did not result in oppression, that were open and captured the authenticity of human beings together in life. So that was kind of a lot, but that really, I think that was the most significant moment for me, and was inspiring in terms of.
Megan, and so I was listening to you talk. I was listening to sort of the content of what you were doing, and long ago Cheryl sort of said, like content matters, but also like it's not. So I was listening as well to sort of like how moved you were by this, and I was also like sort of wondering that it sounds like there's something like personal and relational, possibly systemic. So I wouldn't use these words if I was speaking to somebody else, but I can use those words with you, Megan. So what would be those categories that you would sort of connect with in your valuing, that really, because I could feel the movement of openness that was really carrying you. Mm-hmm. But what category would you say that they were?
I think the predominant category would be structural and relational. So structural in the idea that this setup, that there is a setup that has been, that is possible, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of aspiring and hoping for patterns of cooperation in which we can advance peace in a reliable way.
Yeah. And there's also something that sort of personal about that as well, that you're part of it, I mentioned. I don't know, but yeah,
I think so. And I think that's the relational piece too. So hopefully I will be a part of that, and it will depend on how we work together to achieve it.
And so then, Megan, to kind of step out of that, and like, so the goal was not for me to kind of get a check mark or you to get a check mark in like identifying it. Like, why does it matter whether you can identify a category or not?
I think it really does just advance the precision of my own awareness, right? Of what is when you can identify what's the significance of this to me, then you can hold that and you can and it will pattern what I do about it. Okay, so that's why
Yeah.
I cared, because
Right.
this is what I want to be a part of.
Okay. This is really cool, actually. Like, this to me feels like, so because Leela had such an awesome comment about like, it feels a little like mechanical to sort of try and like identify this concrete thing. And what I've learned from people like Jackie is about developing relationship, the relationality. And so what Megan just said helped me to sort of see like it, in that kind of case, it puts me in a different relationship with myself. If I can feel like, oh, okay, I get, what matters to me is this sort of system and who I am in relation. So it develops a kind of relationship with myself and my feelings and what matters to me. It's not about kind of, aha, I've pinned it down like a butterfly on a board and now I'm looking at it objectively. It's like I'm with myself in a much more significant way. And that is very powerful. It gives me also a different connection with relationship with Megan to be able to connect with her. So it's relational. It isn't a separating and splitting. So that was really helpful. Leela, thank you for asking that question, because it really oriented my curiosity in that particular way. And it really helped me see that in a different way. So that was really helpful. Thank you. So over to you now, Bev.
Great. And so one of the things that you were just saying, Marnie, and I think in terms of developing a relationship with ourselves, right? Becoming discerning about, so what is it that's significant, and kind of using these categories. And what's marvelous about being in a community is that we can actually help each other do that too, which we're going to have a chance to do right now. So we can ask each other and really help with that discernment process by asking each other, so what was significant? And then, where do you think that valuing is living? Which category is sort of most salient to you?